6, we'll go ahead and get started. I like us to get started on time so we can end on time and honor everybody's time. As others come in, they'll just join us and we'll circle back around and figure out ways to fill in the missing points. Again, my name is Esther McBain. I'm one of the regional superintendents here at Portland Public Schools. And on behalf of the Portland Public School staff and the superintendent, I do want to welcome you. Good evening. And this is the second of a series of Phase 2 meetings for Southeast Guiding Coalition. I do want to recognize also that it's been a very busy year, a very interesting year, one filled with twists and turns. So the fact that we all made it here, I think we all deserve an applause. So again, welcome. Thanks for persevering through all the struggles and all the interesting twists and turns. I especially want to welcome our Southeast Guiding Coalition members, our partners, our community members, Portland Public Schools staff, our board of directors, and Flow Analytics. Flow Analytics, with Jed at the helm, has been instrumental in designing with our Portland Public School staff, the different scenarios that was shared in phase 1. They will play a similar role in phase 2 Southeast Guiding Coalition process. At our last meeting, we provided a general overview of what phase 2 Southeast Guiding Coalition work will entail. Tonight, we will delve a little deeper into our processes. We'll provide opportunities for collaboration amongst our members. And yes, we heard you. We do not like talking at people. We actually enjoy having you collaborate. But oftentimes with first meetings, you lay the foundation. So there's a little bit more talk than expected. But we heard you. We will do a whole lot less of that and will allow for greater opportunities for you to collaborate. Before I go any further, I also want to recognize the PPS team who work tirelessly to ensure that these meetings run smoothly. Claire Hertz, Deputy Superintendent Operations, Judy Brennan, Director Enrollment and Balancing, Shanice Clark, Director Community Engagement, Danny Ledesma, the tireless Danny Ledesma, Director Racial Equity and Social Justice, Megan Salvador, Assistant to Claire Hertz, and Gail Warren, Assistant to Claire. I cannot tell you how many emails Megan sends on a daily basis. She is just amazing, keeping track of all the information that we need. Thank you for your support and commitment to the process. Tonight, the plan is to hear from our middle school redesign team, to review the charter and operating guidelines for phase 2, to get an idea of the plan for conducting empathy interviews, to listen to school highlights, and so much more as we center the experience of our Black, Native, Indigenous students and students of color through a racial equity lens. We want to also say thank you to those of you who turned in your responses to the homework 1. There'll be homework 2 again tonight. If you haven't done so and you'd still like to do so, please feel free to submit a response. That said, slide 2, please. So the focus for phase 2 phase 2 Southeast Guiding Coalition is to look at the enrollment and our program balancing. We want to, in the process of doing that, center the experience of our Black, Native, and students of color through a racial equity design process. It means that we're going to do our very best to make sure that we have equitable programs at our schools and that our numbers reflect the needs and support the experience of our middle school students. Next slide, please. One of the things that we commit to ensure that this process is fair and that we have an opportunity to hear everybody's voice and that we truly do make the best decisions is that we commit to our group agreements. Our group agreements insist that we stay engaged as professionals. There are times when things will be said or thoughts would emerge that you may not necessarily approve of or resonate with or want to embrace, but stay engaged, stay committed. Hear them out, ask questions, and give us all the benefit of at least munching through and reviewing those thoughts. Speak your truth responsibly. Again, these are very sensitive topics, sensitive issues. Anytime you talk about program change or shifting boundaries, we do tap into a very deep emotion in an individual. So, think about the people around you and choose to speak your truth responsibly, please. Listen to understand and to believe that we're trying to do the best for our students and our communities. Even when it may not sound that way, ask questions to clarify. Be willing to do things differently and experience discomfort. Yes, it is a very uncomfortable discussion at times, but it is again in the best interest of our future. Expect and accept non closure. This is part of the process. Um, and if it is a little bothersome, reach out to some of us and we'll be able to at least have conversations and talk with you about it. Next slide, please. So some of our school highlights. The purpose of this is for the Southeast Guiding Coalition members to be able to send to our students and to get to know our schools even more. It is essential that you know what the strengths are, the current strengths of our schools, our school leaders, and what we want to do to make them even better than they currently are. It is also important for you to be able to ask questions of these school leaders. Next slide, please. So this is a task. This is a task for those who are highlighted in schools. They'll talk individually for about 30 minutes. And then of course, you'll be able to rotate from room to room to ask questions. We'll return at 6:45. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Esther. Carl, did you want to, is it okay if we back up a slide or two just to provide a little more context about the activity? And Carl, are you there?
I can't see. Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for leaning in with us tonight. So the work that we're engaged in, and especially as we enter the fall, is going to be, it's going to get very technical. There's going to be a lot of data. We're going to look at enrollment numbers. There's building capacity. We're going to be looking at boundary lines. And at times, it's natural to see those just as numbers. But the reality is that each number, that's a grandfather, that's a student, that's one of our amazing leaders, teachers, and paraeducators at our school. So we want to make sure that we continually keep that in mind, that even when we're looking at building capacity, when we're looking at enrollment numbers, and then the reality is like when we speak about Harrison Park or Lane or Bridger, we're not thinking about windows. We're not thinking about walls. We're thinking about that grandmother, right? That first grader, that principal and that teacher at those schools. And so tonight we wanted to give you a glimpse into each of the schools that in the Southeast area that's going to be involved in this process. And so it's just a small vignette into those schools so that you get to know them more and get to know a little bit about their heartbeat of that community. And so you can hear from their leaders and also from the students and staff at that school. And again, I know that it's easy to get lost in numbers, and again, especially when we go into the fall. But we always want to keep in mind that behind every number, there's a family, there's a teacher who's been there for 10 plus years, right? There's siblings, and we just want to make sure that we center and keep the focus on the humanity of each school community. So next, Misha, our middle school redesign director, is going to explain the process that we're going to engage in.
Thank you, Carl. And sorry, Dr. O, for interrupting you.
Oh, no, I'm glad you did because I can't see the notes.
So as Carl said, we wanted to set a purpose for our time together of really understanding the context of each school. Each of our schools in Southeast have many special things about them. And we, or I, may only know about my school. And so we wanted to present an opportunity to get to know other schools for all of you. And so, Megan, I don't know if you're able to, or someone can put the link for the Google site. But on the Google site, so over the next 30 minutes, you will have time to view the video links and documents shared by the school. Some of the videos are the Connect to K videos that they did because it is a great overview of their school. Some have one pagers, and some schools have other videos. But we wanted to share with you just information from their perspective, their community's perspective, their principal's perspective. And so the schools are listed in alphabetical order in grade bands. So you'll have elementary, middle, K-8, and middle school. I ask that you spend time reviewing at least one from each of those grade bands, those sections, hopefully more. Like you'll have 30 minutes, as Dr. O shared, to review, to learn on your own. You can turn your camera off if that's comfortable for you, so you can really dive in. And then the videos and links are all compatible for your phone, your tablet, or your laptop, so you can view them from any device. And as you review the video, there's 2 questions to think about. The first being, what common thread do you notice among the schools? And then what is unique among the schools? So when you get to your group, when we come back, there'll be another task related to those 2 questions. So we're going to have you head off into, I don't know, to your own work time for 30 minutes to review that. And if everyone could come back at 6:45.
Before people leave, I just want to introduce that we have 3 school board members joining us this evening. Director Michelle DePass is with us. Director Scott, our Vice Chair, Scott Bailey is with us, and Director Julia Brim-Edwards. So I just wanted to highlight for them because I'm not sure that, you know, how sometimes they have more than one meeting in the evening, and so we may not have them for the whole meeting. So I wanted to welcome them and thank them for coming tonight. And with that,
and
Misha,
also Dr. Rita Morris, also Director Morris with us.
Oh, good. Great. I looked for her and didn't see her. So thank you. And Director Moore. So 4 board members, thanks for joining us tonight. And Misha, can I turn it back to you? Because I know I kind of cut you off. I was trying to do it before everyone got sent away. Okay, thank you.
No, that was great. It's, you know, it's a Zoom facilitation. We learn to still facilitate and lean on one another throughout this process. So I believe someone from PPS will be sending us in. Oh no, we're not breakout rooms. I'm sorry. I'll see you all back here at 6:45 after you've reviewed the school information. Give just a few more seconds. Trying to see who I can see who is back. Well, I hope you found the time useful to get a glimpse of the schools that are in Southeast, to learn a little bit more, to see faces of kids and people who work there. And again, to see all of the great things happening and all the different opportunities that are presented at each school. So we are going to move into small groups for the next task. And in your group, you'll need a note taker and a presenter. And for our notes, we will use the Jamboard to record our thinking. And you can either, if you're just participating, you can either have the note taker record your response, or you can, sorry, got a little notification that we're recording. Or you can just put your own sticky note on there. I understand sometimes people don't feel comfortable speaking up, so you can use either modes to share your thinking. And so we're going to go into small groups for 20 minutes. And when we return, you'll need your presenter to share just a 1 to 2 minute short summary of your discussion for each question. And there were 2 questions, and they are, what common threads did you notice among the schools? What is unique about each school? And in the Jamboard, each group has their own slide. We also recognize that there might be other questions that come up, so there's also a slide for that.
Before we go off into the rooms, I noticed that Dee Reddy has her hand up. Dee, do you have a question? Dee, can you hear me? All right, I guess make sure you can send us off into our rooms.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I know we didn't even get to the last slide around additional questions, but if there are additional questions, feel free to add them to that Jamboard for your group, or you can go back later or put them in the chat and we will make sure to record those. So to get us started, does anyone want to volunteer to start? Just a quick summary.
Misha, people are still coming back. So if we
Okay.
can just wait another minute. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I saw 68 people, so I didn't know how many we.
Oh, maybe it's just mine that's delayed. Never mind. Please go ahead.
No worries. Anyone want to volunteer first?
Sandy will go.
Thank you, Bro.
So for common threads, folks mentioned Avid. Several of the schools have Avid and Sun. The passion of our leaders and our teachers, and that, each school, it has some, there's some reflection of the community or neighborhood that it lives in, and that one thing that came up also is like it would have been good to also hear challenges, as well as the highlights for each school. For unique, the vast differences in the size of our schools. I think one school which was mentioned was under 300, compared to some schools that are near 700. The school capacity issues differ greatly between many of our schools, and enrichment or elective offerings. And another thing that came up in terms of unique is the ability for certain schools to raise money, and how are they raising money compared to some schools who are not able to do that.
Thank you.
And we really didn't get to the other question.
Columbia could go next. All right. So one of the things that folks noticed in Columbia was the importance of community partnerships, and specifically in terms of Sun partnerships, as well as Avid happening within the school, across various schools. People noticed that racial and cultural and linguistic diversity was really important to how schools saw themselves as part of their identity, and that equity and the racial equity lens, racial equity and social justice lens within PPS was frequently mentioned within school videos or school materials that were shared. Folks noticed that we don't necessarily know a lot from the information about student outcomes and achievement data. And that there are some unique things at every site, but those were the common threads. In terms of uniqueness, it was kind of all over the board. Creative science felt like a Montessori. There was small class size at Lent. We noticed that sometimes schools with higher enrollment can offer more electives, but that didn't hold true across the board necessarily. We also noticed that there was the opportunity to offer communications in multiple languages. There was a presentation from Lent in English and Spanish. Mount Tabor had a flyer that was in multiple languages. And some places had so many languages within their school that it might have been difficult to have all of the languages represented in one short presentation. Several schools highlighted programmatic focuses as well. There were a few different questions. One is about the balance between enrollment and facility space when thinking about electives. People were just appreciative of the chance to learn more. And folks had some questions about creative science. And since the program is really unique, how does that impact outcomes?
If you scroll all the way back to Clackamas, we can go. Lovely. I think that very similar, there are some pieces around common threads. I think that we spent more time actually on the questions, like additional questions that surface. So if you could click over to the questions, but there's a lot about demographics. Do the demographics of the principal match the demographics of the school as one of the notices or not? I think there was the personalization that happened across the videos in particular, I think was helpful. The intent of the information seemed different, and that kind of takes us to the question. So if we could scoot to the next part of the Jamboard, please. Thank you. There was a piece about how to get a sense of what is unique. So it's kind of like what that was part of the conversation, but then also that it was hard, it was challenging to see without really getting a feel. Like, how could you get a feel for the space? And so one of the suggestions, I believe, was maybe like a day in the school life. Like maybe that would give a better feel of sort of what the culture of the school is. And then the last one, if you can go one more, please, is around, you know, how do we use this information? What additional information would be needed? How do we start to build out our common understanding? I think there's some pieces about, again, trying to say, how does this inform the decisions and sort of how does that feel? Were the highlights, I would say. And going back out, like, are there specific, I think this, the post-it note at the bottom where it's like, what questions would the community like answered? Like, are there other things that the community would like to know about that wasn't surfaced from what was provided from the school side?
So for Willamette, a couple of the things that I don't believe have been talked about for the common threads, focus on academics and lifelong learning. There seemed to be, in most of the schools, special programming, some type of special programming. A lot of the schools were named after dead white men. There's a majority of the Southeast schools have a diversity in their demographics. And let's see here. And all of the middle schools had the common minimum requirements for their academic programs. Some of the unique stuff that some of the schools spoke about grants when others did. So I think someone had mentioned funding as a question. Some of the schools presented in diverse languages when others didn't. So that that led us to have a conversation a little bit about the demographics within the schools. Demographics were not universally shared, so I think there was that, what are the common things that we want answered in order to really understand the differences with the schools, and that some of the support staff weren't consistent throughout the schools. So, special ed, special assistants, assistant principals, like I can't remember all the ones that we talked about. And we didn't get to question 3.
Thank you everyone for taking time to review the videos, think about them, ask the questions. And again, just kind of what Carl shared in the beginning, when we were thinking about our schools, we're thinking about moving kids or numbers really to balance, that we're really thinking about the kids at the school, the family, the educators, the principals, that how will this impact and what will be, or what's our intent, and then what will be the impact. So hopefully this kind of helped us get our brains wrapped around each community, even if it was just a very small glimpse. So I appreciate you all taking the time to do that. We are going to take a break for 10 minutes and we'll come back at 7:25. So thank you for your time, and Kristen will start us off when we return.
We're just about ready to get started. And I think we need to start re-recording, yes? I'm going to pause for a second so that we can make sure that we've got the recording on. All right. I think that we are now recording. So good evening. Hi, I'm Kristen Westfall. I'm the Area Senior Director supporting middle schools. And I'm really glad that we had a chance to hear from each of the schools within our Southeast Guiding Coalition about their programs, about their students, about what makes their schools special, and also about what's shared across schools. And as part of the work that we're doing this evening, we also want to make sure that you have a chance to hear in a bit more detail and get some questions answered from the schools that are potentially most affected by the process that we are engaged in. So you're gonna have a chance to hear from Harrison Park, from Lane, and from Creative Science within some breakout rooms. You're also gonna get a chance to hear from our Director of Middle School Redesign, Misha Plotsky, as well as from folks in the district office who serve in roles around special education, dual language immersion, and English language development programs, so that you can have questions answered about what those programs look like in the Southeast and how they're different and similar across our varied schools. So when we go into our breakout rooms, the hosts are actually going to be moving from room to room. The participants are going to stay in the same room. We have 15-minute rotations. The presenters will present for about 1 minute to 2 minutes, and then the rest of the time will be for questions that you may have. So in just a second, we're going to be whisked away into those rooms. Back together, and I know that we have 10 minutes on the slide for sharing questions and discussion that came up in our small rooms, but I know that we're also slightly over time, so I don't know if we want to modify that a little bit, but feel free to unmute yourself and share anything you would like to share that came up in your small groups. And yes, as Dr. Elwood's putting in the chat, a big thank you to everybody that shared information in our small group breakouts.
I guess I have a question, and it's how has the geographic distribution of some of the special programs in the district been determined? I mean, some of it seems like it kind of evolved kind of organically based on communities, but is there, and I think especially in light of the middle school redesign, is there any kind of district-wide look at the spatial distribution of these programs and where they're located and who has access to what. And I think the question also comes out of the last presentation about creative science, and participation in that school is limited by access, right? So that's when geographic distribution becomes important.
Yeah, in terms of middle school redesign, it is something that we can take a look at. Oh, sorry, were you done? Did I interrupt you? Okay. Well, yeah, we'll take a look at and have conversation. It can be brought to the table as all things in middle school redesign. I think, and I don't know, because I've only been in PPS 7 years, but I feel like a lot of the programs are really tied to the community.
So as sort of an elder statesman, I will say that the location of focus option programs has been completely unplanned and random.
This is a question I've got. Oh, sorry. You can go ahead.
My question about our focus options is, have we looked at the existence of focus options through the lens of equity, and in what ways do they serve and promote equity within our district?
Dr. Bohr and I have been trying to get a review like that for over 10 years. And if Judy Brennan will witness that. There was supposed to have been one, but it really wasn't any kind of a thorough analysis of what, 3 or 4 years ago. So that work.
That was in 2016.
Yeah, still needs to be done. And it is what it is, but it's unfortunate that it wasn't done before we started enrollment balancing. Well, this round.
I see that Martha's asking in the chat, are there plans to expand DLI to supply the higher degree of demand that's not able to be addressed by current focus and dual language immersion schools?
So there's another question prior to that. I don't know if I want to answer both of those at the same time. You know, there's a number of electives for DLI students have. It depends on whether there's a 6-period day or 7-period day, but the partner language arts course does take the place of one of the electives, and that's stated up front with our families as they come into the program. There are many students that take world languages, so it's essentially that course, that elective. Percentage of students earning the C-level by literacy, I don't have that information on hand. I can get that for you. And how many of those are not native speaking, which is the same data point I'd have to pull. Expansion is really sort of as we track, and what we've been trying to measure that on is where our emergent bilingual children are, and how many of them, or how many we're able to serve. And we've been trying to get pretty close to, or be getting fairly close to capturing as many or all of those at the K level, but there's still some that we're not. So, you know, obviously if we're going to follow our linguistic equity lens, that would be something we need to consider.
Michael, do those families also need to transport themselves?
So one of the things we did a number of years ago was to work with transportation, and the board approved this to have some a certain limited number of buses that are really designated to serve our historically underserved populations. And those bus routes are actually set on where those students live, rather than we don't just do everybody in the program. We actually choose very strategically, and I work closely with transportation, and we where our emergent bilingual children are and kids of poverty, other historically underserved populations, so that they can access our programs. We obviously try to put the programs ideally closest to where they live, so we limit that. So that's why Lent was chosen. You know, that's why Ridger, well, in late at the points of time the programs are started. So Rigler, Scott, high population, Cesar Chavez, So trying to place them as close to where our families are, so increase access. But we do have to do busing because they don't all live in one neighborhood, right? And sometimes they're fairly dispersed, depending on the language, depending on the part of the city.
And Michael, I think you may have been responding to some questions that were in the chat from the small group that
Yeah.
we're able to see in the general group, but can you speak specifically about the expansion of DLI? And then I see that Elizabeth has put in a question about focus options as well.
So are there plans? We've been looking at, what we've done over the years is we look at the data and trying to figure out how many emergent bilingual children we're not serving in particular languages. And when we can identify a critical mass or a number that we can, and to generate another program or generate another classroom within a program, that's where we look for expansion opportunities. Obviously, with the last couple of years, we've had some pretty different things happening for us. So we haven't looked at that. We haven't had an exact plan right now. We need to continue to monitor that and look at that data. So right now we don't. We had been considering Arabic and Southwest, but we ran out of space in a building. We just could not find a space because it's very dispersed population. And better than that is maybe to look at somewhere where there might be ability to add a classroom as a part of this effort. So Lent might be an opportunity for that. So I don't know, in terms of focus option, DLI, are you asking me to respond to that question?
No, I was just noting that before we move on to other things, that there's
okay.
Another question that's about focus options, and perhaps one of the directors wants to respond to it, or Dr. O, whether focus options should be looked at in terms of the SCGC work, and if there's a concentration of these programs that impacts enrollment in this part of the district, as we're thinking about whether focus options promote or limit equity.
I do believe that focus options do need to be looked at in terms of SCGC work, because it's a driver for what schools parents go to and what programs children enroll into. So yes, definitely.
And we're at 8:35, so I'm not quite sure how we're doing on time and if we need to proceed on to our charter review.
We do have one more message from Martha, Director Bailey, if we could, that one.
From my previous understanding, didn't Mr. Scott Bailey say that the focus points were placed in schools at random? Did I mishear that? I'm just seeking clarification here.
So let me specify what I mean by focus option schools. Those are schools like Da Vinci, Creative Science, Odyssey, Winter Haven, Richmond to a certain extent, that to get in you have to lottery. And the location of those schools, of those programs, was not planned, or even the types of programs. Gee, should we have a portfolio of focus programs like that? If so, what should the portfolio be? Where should they be located? How can we ensure equitable access to those programs? None of those questions came up. They just, Da Vinci was in part parent driven, in part staff driven to start an arts program. Same thing with environmental, what is now Sunnyside. Initially, it was a focus option program that was pure lottery. It was co-located at Abernathy for a while and then moved. But it moved because there was an opening at a building. Richmond shared a building with a neighborhood school, and then it eventually expanded and took over the entire building. But there was no plan in terms of the locations of that. And Judy Brennan is timing in that a lot of these programs started in the 1990s. And again, it was kind of spontaneous, and a number of them ended up, as has been noted, in Southeast, and it really impacts enrollment. And we, in our small group, there was a little under enrollment. Sabrina, do you want to? under enrollment really impacts the school community.
Can I just give an example of that? So for people that aren't as aware, just a really concrete thing. Vestal School is on 82nd, and Creative Science is on what, 92nd? Creative Science is the closest focus option school to Vestal. There's no limitation on how many kids from a certain neighborhood can be lotteried in. And Vestal loses about 50% of our neighborhood kids that lottery into Creative Science, and it creates a true imbalance. And when you look at the demographics, it's mostly white and middle upper class families that choose to leave Vestal. So I don't mean to only point out Vestal, it's just that that's my closest experience. Of intended or unintended, it's a huge consequence on neighborhood schools for years and years.
As a member of the Superintendent's Advisory Committee on Enrollment and Transfer, aka SACIT, a number of years ago, we tried to get that changed so that there was more of a balance, a geographical balance of where introduced into the lottery, so you didn't have that impact. And Judy, remind me at what level that got vetoed. I can't remember if it was by the superintendent or by the board.
Sorry, the question?
The enrollment balancing thing that we tried to do, sort of the Benson kind of model for the lottery for the K-8 focus options. That was a proposal on the table, and it got, anyway, regardless.
That was in 2015. And so the common thread here is lots of one-off individual decisions having a cumulative effect without really sort of a district, I don't know if plan is the right word for how to best manage the impact on all of the other schools. And the Vestal is a good experience of that.
Does the district manages the lottery correctly? Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so it seems like you already have a mechanism that could add this correction in there, right?
We could,
which is
and I
a
want to
good
point
sign,
out
at least.
that, and happy to maybe do a later segment at a future meeting where maybe we go into those choice elements, because I know that we've got another important topic to bring to the table tonight. But absolutely, there's always ways to look at how to resolve issues.
Sure, I'm just saying that's the one mechanism that's already in place without us moving anybody anywhere, right? That's caps. And so one less majorly huge decision, and this just starts to move a needle. But thank you.
Sure.
I think there was one other unanswered question in the chat about how we choose which DLI programs can expand beyond native speaker needs. And I know that we also need to move on to talking about the charter as well.
Well, one of our efforts is actually to really increase the native speakers in all of our programs, and Richmond is one of those, and that has actually increased significantly. I don't know what maybe Judy knows the exact percentage this last year where we're in our entering classes, but so that's something we've worked to actually move all of our programs closer to being what we call two-way programs, where we have about more balanced, or 1/3 to 2/3 native speakers versus the partner language versus English.
That's right. We monitor those enrollment trends every year. Look for native speakers who are winding up not in DLI, trying to understand better by working with those families and schools to see what the barrier or limitation is, and where there's a critical mass of additional students, then make the effort to expand and have that program be accessible first and foremost to native speakers. The challenge comes when we have a lot of room for native speakers, but we don't have significant enrollment, and then it disrupts the model, and it also leads to more English speakers sometimes being placed. So
I know we have a lot of interest in focus options and in location of DLI programs, and I also want to keep us to the charge of our current SEGC in the second part. So thank you everybody for your questions. I know that there will be a chance to have additional questions answered as they come up. And I'm going to go ahead and move us on to the next part of our session tonight.
And before we move to Esther, we will be capturing all of the chats that are, all the questions that are in the chat, and we will send that out to the coalition with responses to those questions so that they are not unheard. And we will go on and move to Esther.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a very rich evening so far. I do want to thank our room facilitators. I also want to thank our principals for an excellent job on the one page and the videos. And I want to also thank our presenters. Thank you so much. The community, our stakeholders have had a little bit more information today about our different schools than they did when they first came in. And we're hoping that you hold on to those pieces of information so that as we think about balance in our schools, yes, I know that we're starting with Harrison Park and Lane, but eventually it will be across the district, that you will hang on to a lot of the information you received tonight because it will serve us well as we hold discussions that are more objective than subjective. Thank you again for all your work. I will be going over the charter review, and the charter, as you know, is just pretty much a document outlining how we do business. It's been sent out to our SEGC members, and I know that many of you have had the opportunity to review it, so I'm not going to be going over it in detail. I'm just going to give a general broad overview, and of course, we'll revisit it as time permits in the future, in our future meetings. Tonight, we also spent time laying the foundation for the work that we are going to be doing. We talked a little bit about who's going to be included in the work. We have involved our instructional leaders because we feel that they have the best information regarding their schools and their programs. We have also elicited the support and the feedback from our community members. Your feedback and your information has helped us redesign and redevelop this charter that I am going to be sharing tonight. One of the things that you requested is that, based on phase one, is that you would like a mission statement. The very top of our charter does talk about our mission statement. And in a nutshell, it is to figure out how to balance enrollment and programs across the district, starting of course with the Southeast area. We are also going to be looking at the coalition purpose, which is pretty much a repeat of what I just said, which is to as much as possible balance enrollment. We're going to start with Lane Middle School, and then we're going to look at Harrison Park becoming a middle school, while we'll try to relocate the K-5 portion of Harrison Park Middle School. We are also going to be looking at the different sections that are in our charter. For example, we have provided space for empathy interviews that will give us the opportunity to capture student voices from a cross section of our schools and our populations. We have a PAT rep that will be part of this whole process, so that way we get some teacher voice in there. And we will also continue to center our work around our racial equity and social justice needs, using our principals, of course, as a lens because they have the closest relationship to their school communities. Our operating guidelines focus around increasing, pardon me, you asked us to define a robust enrollment. What is a robust enrollment? What does that entail? Right now, we don't have a definitive number, but I will tell you that one of the things that we are looking at is having significant enough numbers at our middle schools, anything from 550 to maybe 700, that will allow us to provide programs that support and help us develop our middle school students. Of course, that is contingent on space, and our schools all differ in terms of how much space they have. So we also made clear that this decision-making process will be modified. We will have a modified consensus-making decision process where we'll make a recommendation to the deputy superintendent. If there is no consensus, we'll try the 5-to-5 method to help out in reaching consensus. If that cannot be reached, the Southeast Guiding Coalition will use a majority rule vote. The majority rule vote can be modified, of course, by the deputy superintendent. She will forward her information to the board. The board, of course, can make their own recommendation. They can also further modify what we send to them by receiving input from either students, from the community, or from members of the Southeast Guiding Coalition. Questions so far? So please spend some time going over the charter. A lot of the responses that we have in the charter is based on the feedback that you gave us. And we have worked really hard to make sure that we have those responses embedded in the charter. Next slide, please. So from our first meeting, we did get some homework from the Enrollment and Balancing Office, and the homework is right here. We sent out, I think, 35 emails requesting responses from community members, and we received 6 responses. We also sent out 20 requests to our leaders, and we received 6 responses. So we have 12 responses total out of about 55 asks. That is not an impressive number, but I will chuck it up to this is the very first time we're making an ask such as that. We're also going to be gracious enough to leave the opportunity open for you to still respond. Of the responses that we have, of course, the top areas of interest are the low enrollment at Lane and Harrison Park. We're also looking at the stock enrollment and demographic differences across middle schools. A majority of the Black and Native schools attend middle schools with lower utilization rates. These are, of course, the big rocks that emerged from the 12 responses we got. We'll reach out to our community organizations in Southeast Portland and work with PTAs and schools to engage families, one-on-one phone calls to connect our families. We recognize that our families of color like to be contacted so they can ask clarifying questions in a risk-free environment, and of course share their concerns or their suggestions as the case may be. We'll also be looking at extended boundaries, and that is a good starting point, but how is that going to look? We'll consider affinity groups, and of course we will like to increase the focus of our middle school experience rather than what the boundary calls for, so that our students of color are free or able to go to any middle school of their choice. Again, based on the 12 responses, those are the 5 big rocks that emerged. Please send in additional responses. We want to be able to continue to grow this area. Additionally, there will be homework from this meeting as well. You will have a lot more time, of course, to complete the homework this time, because we will not reconvene again until the 26th of August, 2021. You will get your materials on the 17th of August. So between now and the 17th of August is plenty of time to complete the homework 2 assignment. Next slide, please. Oh, I don't know if Shanice is here. Shanice, would you like to speak to them for the interviews?
Yes. I know we are a little over time, but I just also wanted to mention before hopping into the slide that we are definitely in the middle or in progress of designing a robust level of engagement, and are underway with a number of efforts virtually through text messaging and creating surveys to reach families. But we particularly are going to be creating these spaces to reach our Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, and want to ensure that the perspectives are incorporated into your process of building a recommendation. In addition to holding specific targeted spaces for students, student forums, and robust engagement that will be supported by a number of folks in this space and outside of it. So I think in addition to kind of starting our muscles with this preliminary initial insight to ground our work, we are doing a number of methods, and one of them will be empathy interviewing. Our middle school redesign process will have empathy tours, which we'll get to also participate in this year. But before that takes place, we want to practice or exercise this approach within the Southeast Guiding Coalition. So you all will receive a form that essentially asks a guiding question around the themes that we've discussed tonight. And what we want to seek to understand is what is special about a student or a family member's school's identity, and what's something that they'd like to remain the same. I know that from our discussions tonight, we talked about reflecting the community that is in or surrounding a school, at the school, our AVID programs, our SUN programs. And so these are the things that we're hoping to hear from other folks. And the ask is by the 26th of August to talk to one person from your school community that you're representing here in the coalition. And so one or two people to kind of ask this guiding question, what is special about their school's identity, or what's something that's important to maintain. And we want to help with that sort of discussion with guiding prompts or hints. And here are some tips, especially as we think about having direct dialogue with one person in our community, and encouraging that storytelling, and leading with that attention to the nonverbal cues that folks are exhibiting, and sitting in silence to leave room for thought. And so the next slide, there's some more hints as well. And I know that some folks may or may not need to utilize some of these. But yeah, the next slide, there's some more hints. We can move along to the next slide. Please and thank you. But I will tell you what's on the next slide anyway. But we have just some more thoughts around having questions that are neutral, and not necessarily suggesting answers for questions, but leaving room for folks to encourage storytelling, memories, or anything that they'd like to offer. If it isn't a specific program, that those things are also important as well. And you could do this in pairs, you could do it on your own, but that is the ask by the next meeting, to have a conversation with one person in your school community, and really gauge what's special about their school identity that needs to remain or be maintained. And so that is our ask of you all, and we have a little bit more time to do it before the next time we reconnect, and we'll really supplement all the other data that we will be able to take in to support our work moving forward. Now, I will pass it to Esther.
Thank you very much, Shanice, for the explanation on the empathy interviews and how they're going to happen. I also, in closing, want to thank every participant on this forum, especially our community members. I do realize this is a huge time investment, but it is in the interest of our future, and it is for the greater good. So we thank you so much for your participation in our second Southeast Guiding Coalition Phase 2 meeting. The level of engagement and enthusiasm today is greatly appreciated. Please complete the feedback form that is on the screen, and make sure that it is sent in appropriately so that we can again gather your feedback and use that feedback to design our upcoming meeting. Our next meeting will be held on the 26th of August. You should receive your materials by the 17th of August. And in the interim, please continue to review the materials that you have, and send in your questions, send in your suggestions, and again, give us your feedback. Have a great summer, get some rest, spend time with family and friends, and we will see you in the fall. Thank you again to our presenters, our facilitators, and our team.
So we have one hand raised if we want to hear from Jennifer Fontana.
Thanks, Claire. I just wanted to ask if for when we return, if we can get a little more clarity and information about the empathy interview process. I remember from phase one that there was some concern about the limited number of participants in the interviews that were collected and how families were included. And so I'd like to just invite us to consider potentially sharing the process of how the empathy interviews are conducted with the coalition, including information such as how and when families will be invited to participate, how many families will be included, who will be conducting the empathy interviews, how the information is going to be analyzed and synthesized for the coalition, and whether or not or how all supported languages will be included.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's noted. So again, the meeting evaluation form is in the chat. If you would please take time to complete it, and safe travels home. Have a great summer.